Pop said, I don't know how to read. And Greg said, but you have a Bible. You carry it around all the time. Why do you do that if you can't read it? He said, I just read the parts I know by heart, like the Lord's Prayer. Greg realized right there that he might have what he needed to start to learn to read. He got his hands on a Watchtower magazine left by some missionaries and a copy of the Bible. He found the Lord's Prayer and he went through the magazine and underlined every word that was in the Lord's Prayer. He shocked himself with how many words he knew. He spent years underlining and learning words based on the words from the Lord's Prayer. He even learned what some of them meant, which was a challenge, because the only dictionary he could get his hands on stopped at the letter P. A few more years of reading newspapers, especially crime reports, following legal cases, he became proficient enough to write the brief that got the attention of the Innocence Project. In 1975, when Greg Wright went to jail, the VCR and disposable razors were introduced to the world. The Captain and Tennille had the top hits. Love Will Keep Us Together. 27 and a half years later, when he finally saw freedom, the world was a very different place. Today, Greg is a public speaker, a performer, and a freelance writer. He's funny, and he's smart, and he's gifted. What he is not is bitter, angry, or hostile. I told him that in 1975 I was entering into an ill-fated marriage. His reply, how long did you have to serve? Leroy Bo White was a teenager in Louisiana in 1969 on a very special summer day. New Iberia was still segregated, but on that day, that one day, everyone was allowed to enter the park. And that day, a young white woman was raped, and several black boys were arrested. They were threatened, denied counsel, even bathroom breaks for hours. In keeping with this unconstitutional treatment, the young woman was helped with her identification, and 6 black men went to trial for rape, but not after a deputy stuck a rifle in Bo's face and said he'd see him on death row. Bo pled not guilty, but his lawyer convinced him that he needed to plead guilty to avoid the death penalty. Bo languished in prison until 2003, when DNA testing was sought, and the testing ruled Bo out as the rapist. In 2007, after serving 37 years in Angola, Bo was finally free. Bo was a strikingly good-looking man. He has a nobility about him. He's classy, and I don't know how you learn that in prison, since that's where he spent most of his life. But you have to wonder. A couple of months after his release, he came to New Orleans to address a group of law students, and I volunteered to pick him up at the bus station. I'd never been to the bus station. So I could see him, and he could see me, but I was caught in a traffic circle over here, and I was the one in charge. So I kept waving at him. And he stood there, you know, with his bag, you know, like, okay. And I get that a lot, by the way, from the exonerees. I think they really wonder how it is I made it this far. But I finally got him. I put him in the car and wheeled him to the entry of the hotel. I handed him the cell phone that we'd gotten for him, and I unloaded his bags and I waved goodbye. As I walked back to the car, I felt more than saw Bo. He was frozen on the sidewalk. This elegant, regal, 6-foot man was looking about 4 years old and terrified. I did a mental head slap and went back to him. Let me help you get settled, Bo. This is probably weird, huh? His relief was palpable. It was a nice hotel with a desk clerk sporting a heavy European accent. She rattled off welcomes and clicked on her keyboard and swiped a card and slapped it into a little wallet thing and handed it to him, saying, "Here's your room key." Well, that may have been a room key in 2007, but in 1969, a key looked like a key. Her directions to his room confused even me, so I knew he was going to be lost. But I was also hyper-aware of the fact that the last time he was probably around a white woman, he was accused of rape, and 37 years later, he was standing with another one taken into a bedroom. As we worked our partway through this maze of directions, I chatted him up to keep us both from freaking out. He said, you know, what do I do in this room? And I said, anything you would do at home. You can watch TV, you can take a nap, you can take a shower, anything. He said, they'll have a TV? I said, oh yeah. My guess is this place will have a wall dedicated to a TV. I brought a towel, he said. I assured him they would have towels and he should feel free to use every one of them. I showed him how to use the cell phone, and I showed him how to get into his room and how to lock it inside. I left there humbled and amazed at how these guys do it. I've lived on the outside all of these years, and there are days I don't get it. I can't imagine trying to learn for the first time as an adult. Of course, it's not easy for any of them. I don't know how Dan has managed sometimes. His twin daughters were toddlers when he went to prison, and when he came home, they were precocious teenagers. I lived with my son from infancy to teen years, and the changes in him right in front of my face were baffling and frightening. If I had not had the preceding years of cuteness, I'm not sure I could have tolerated it. So what about this thing we always hear? The worst of the worst. Who are they? Maybe they deserve to die. Maybe the state has proven these people have forfeited their right to live among us. After all, we are us, and they are them. What about John Wayne Gacy? We know he was bad. 33 boys and men whose remains were found largely in his home. What's to dispute here? Kill the bastard. Or Charles Manson, come on, Charles Manson. Obviously, he's not like us. And why do we have to pay to keep him alive? Why don't we just kill him and be done with it? But wait, there might be an issue of mental illness here now that I think of it. Maybe we should consider the humanity of executing the mentally ill. Actually, that hasn't stopped us in the past. Nor have we worried much about executing the mentally retarded. Take, for example, the man finishing his last meal when the guards came to take him to the death chamber. He genially asked one of the guards to save his dessert so that he could have it when he got back. But we killed him. Well, maybe we need to think harder about the mentally ill and the mentally retarded, okay. But what about Stan Tookie Williams? Really, I mean, he's the founder of the Crips. That badass street gang, and everybody knows he killed people. He must be right for execution. Let's look closer at this one. Okay, why start a gang? Could it be the natural result of an isolated, disenfranchised, undereducated population of young black men living in fear with an unfulfilled promise of equal rights, suffering through the daily challenges of South Central LA that no one in this room could fathom? They banded together to protect themselves, but also to protect some, even less able to cope. The intent was not initially about killing. Their intent was simply to survive and not become victims. Without real family, they created their own family. But the headiness of their newfound power, however, took over. And soon, they were sucked in by the allure, because power, as we know, is an aphrodisiac. And Tookie was not immune. There is no doubt that Tookie not only killed, he spawned an international violent gang that remains to this day. But that's not all the Tookie story. While on death row, Tookie came to see his power and place in the world differently. He realized that if he could build an international empire on violence, he could also build one on peace. He wrote a series of children's books about avoiding the gang life. He gave courage and hope to another generation of disenfranchised young people around the world and was nominated for a Nobel Prize. Clearly, he was not the same man all those years earlier on the hard streets of South Central LA, but we killed him anyway. Unable or unwilling to consider that he had proven himself valuable to society, the state of California stuck a needle in Tookie's arm in 2005 after the Terminator refused to step in and stop it. 3 men have been executed in Nebraska since 1976. Willie Ote, John Jubert, and Bob Williams. My friends Dick and Christy knew Bob Williams and considered him family. They were willing to consider that regardless of what brought Bob to this place, he had something to offer the world. He was us, not them. But the state of Nebraska killed him too. And Dick